Hi, kia ora. I'm going to give it's a much lighter talk than Walter's, which was absolutely amazing, wasn't it? I always thought storytelling, like good landscape and urban design, is about storytelling. But what I've learned in this conference is, through the visitors from America, is we've actually got to tell other people's stories, because we tend to tell our own stories rather than other people's stories. Disruption. I'm just starting this. This has got nothing to do with my talk. Just to thank the Institute for putting this on in Christchurch. It's amazing. It was amazing to see the city come alive last night. And I think it's a great recognition also of what's been achieved in the city. And isn't it an amazing place that we live in? This is where my family grew up. My family grew up in the centre of Glasgow. You'll notice the trams, you'll notice the shops, mixed use, walk up, no lifts. People weren't fat in Glasgow back then. There's no obesity. It was a community, but it was designated a slum. And so they pulled it down and they replaced it with high-rise housing. There's another thing that I took away from one of the talks. My family were put in poverty at that point because they owned their apartment. They were given a rental apartment. So they were disenfranchised from property owning. We were called a ghetto. We were a Catholic ghetto. And that was the reason why they were demolished. It was social integration. I grew up there, socially integrated, which meant we didn't have to travel to fight the Protestants. We could fight them in the street where we lived. So it was quite good. But it's soulless, it's modernist. And again, there's so many parallels. No food. That's a bottle shop. There were no shops. 50,000 people, 4 shops, none of them selling groceries, really. No public transport. So a lot of people like him created disruption in Australia, because when he arrived in Australia at the same time as my brother and my family, they were still listening to Frank Highfield yodeling. So he changed that. But the biggest thing that disenfranchised everybody was the car. So we talk about disruption now. The cell phone, all that, small beer. This was a big deal. This thing, which is actually a lovely item, that one, changed the whole nature of how we lived. I'll paraphrase Churchill. Not a big fan of Churchill, basically. I'll paraphrase him. He said, first we shape the city, and then it shapes us. When he said it, he meant it. The hierarchy shaped the city, so that the other people live in that city and that they are shaped by it. The car created this. A mile away from intensive communities and neighbourhoods where everybody knew each other and they all drank in the same corner pub and they shopped in the same shops, rich and poor. This is what we ended up, totally dominated by the car, suburbia. Then affluent suburbia meant just build the houses bigger, but still the same pattern, still the same isolation. In fact, less need to go out now because you've got fridges, you don't need to go shopping so much, you've got swimming pools, you don't need to go to a common swimming pool or a bath. Actually, we didn't have indoor bathrooms in our apartments in Glasgow, but so we got to know our neighbours really well, and the common bathhouses outside. And then the new urbanists came along, and they just kept building crap too, really. I mean, this is a new urbanist development with a shared common garden. Joke. You notice there's not a tree there? And also, it doesn't matter what you do, 40% of the public space was given over to the car. 40% is a huge amount of land. I know that because you probably know as well, you're involved in subdivisions. You know, the time you do all that stuff for the car, you've hardly got any land left to develop. So, we all know that we're at a tipping point now, that we have a battle. Glasgow, 1950, had trams. It had tenements, it had neighbourhoods, it had vibrancy, it had life. By 1960, it didn't have trams, and it had suburbanised in that kind of strange way that we did it with the high-rise apartments. But what it didn't say, these high-rise apartments were actually built on the edges of Glasgow. They took city people and dumped them out in the paddocks. So I grew up surrounded by paddocks. But the other thing that we're doing We're creating an underclass that's deeper and deeper, and it's going to get worse. It is getting worse. The way that we've built our cities and the way we've developed our economies means that we are developing a large number of losers. People who are missing out on the uplift. Trickle down didn't work. May as well be honest about it. It's worked for the 1%. It's trickle up, not trickle down. And so we've got major social issues coming. We have a generation, including my kids, that are locked out of property ownership yet again. Unless their parents happen to have been lucky in that they were privileged and bought 2 or 3 houses and got the capital gains and are able to help them. But again, that's probably only another 15% of the population. What about the other ones who will then have to get a reverse mortgage so they don't end up like that guy? Because there's where the pensioners will be, who haven't got assets because we don't look after anybody anymore, because we don't live in communities and neighbourhoods. And our cities are being abandoned. Part of the reason why I'm in Geelong is that Ford closed and other big factories closed. So Geelong's got a lot of vacant buildings. It's got unemployment. It's got new employment, high-tech, green industries, education, medicine. But what about the people that worked in all these factories? They're not geared up for that. They've been abandoned now. They're bogans. They all wear mullets. It's really cool. And we're being watched constantly. In fact, we're doing it ourselves by using our cell phones. And we're constantly monitored. Our opinions are monitored. You know, if you translate that to wartime Europe, imagine that amount of information in people's hands. And we are all living, basically, in a Blade Runner state. We're there. Blade Runner is one of my favourite movies. I love dystopia. You know, I'm meant to be a utopian, but I love dystopian images. It's fantastic. I love it. That brings out the graffiti artist in me, you see. But I didn't realise it actually was the new economist's Bible for how the cities would be in the future. The rich live in an isolated place protected by armed police forces. And the rest of the city is left to crumble. So you don't need to bother about them because you're in your ivory tower, your green building with your green roofs and your green walls and all that, and you don't go out on the ground floor. So kind of Blade Runner environment, kind of like. But I don't think it's a healthy world. And then we have protests erupting everywhere, all over the world at the moment, protests. And you get this, the media is controlled, and you get things like, I actually fell down laughing at one point when I heard the news, and there was someone seriously talking on the news about all the protests in Hong Kong. It's affected the stock market. That's what it's meant to do. It's a protest. Meant to disrupt the economy. They want change. They want civil rights. But underlying, you go to Chile, you go all over the world at the moment, people are getting pissed off. Not just about environmental destruction, but the social destruction that's happening. This fabric that we actually live in is being destroyed. So, how do we disrupt the system? Well, this is a homage to, have you noticed now on the TV they go homage? I never knew it was a homage. It's been very panish. Yeah, homage. So this is a homage to World Town Planning Day, right? So World Town Planning Day, good old Ebenezer Hurd, he wanted to put 230,000 people in a garden city, in 60,000 acres. Put that into context, there's about less than double that population in Christchurch today, and Christchurch is 3 times that size. But this also included farmland in that 60,000 acres. And it was all connected by public transport because they hadn't envisaged the car then. Christchurch 1922 was a compact garden city. Okay, I won't go into that because there's a whole lot of colonial stuff going on as well. But basically based on transit, public transport, you didn't have cars, very few people had cars, you got around by tram. So you had tight neighbourhoods where you could do most of the things you needed to do in the neighbourhood, and you could get trams out to where you needed to get things that weren't in your neighbourhood. Very simple way of living. But we kind of messed that up, and we missed a little bit of a chance, but I'm a great believer there's always a second chance. It's never too late, really. Maybe it is. I was watching a movie the other day, and the guy kept talking about it's 1 minute to midnight, and I thought, he's probably right. We're almost 1 minute to midnight, and we're almost stuffed now. But basically, it's not too late. And I had this thing going in my head after the earthquake. Wouldn't it be great to open up all the streams and the rivers again all through the city because we had the opportunity to? Wouldn't it be good if then we connected these together where they weren't with greenways and walkways? And sure, we've got the Otakaro River Corridor, which is kind of like that. That's one of them. You know, can we do that? Could we then intensify nodes and villages and have a multinodal city with a city centre at the heart of it, but a multinodal city, and let suburbia drift away? Don't densify it. Let people plant trees. Start switching off the sewer so they have to deal with their own waste. Don't fix up the roads. Just let the roads crumble and let plants take over. Let them put solar power on. Could you turn the power off to them? And I've never lived in suburbia, so I can be quite righteous about this. And you know, let them grow their own veggies. And don't supply public transport to them, because we can't. So why can't we have really good sustainable suburbia and really, really good sustainable urbia, if there's such a word? I'll just claim that word. And then, just like old, you can see Ebenezer Herd emerging here, can't you? The garden city of tomorrow. So then you connect with a ring road. We actually have that already. But that ring road becomes a public transit road, not a car road. So it has trams on it, light rail, whatever. I love the new trackless trams. I call them buses. I'll get a new word for them, bus. I used to be a bus driver. That was scary because I'm a crap driver. So anybody that I've driven around here will actually say that I'm a really bad driver because I only look at buildings and places when I'm driving. And I usually stop at the lights to look at the corners of the buildings, regardless of what the lights are saying at the time. And so you get the ring road, and then let's revive our country towns and our provincial towns. Why do we just let tourists go across to Greymouth? Why don't we put a fast train onto Greymouth? Like, maybe there's a reason they would all come here. No, maybe we don't do that. I like Greymouth. Just finished a project there last year. And so we have a completely transit-based centre where we have a tree canopy throughout suburbia and really intensive town centres, all transit-oriented. I don't think it's that difficult to achieve. It just needs a will. 60 years ago, we didn't have cars. Look at the will that the manufacturing capacity that was created by the war in America, a little bit in Britain, then later in Japan and Germany because of American aid, that manufacturing had to find something to do. I got into trouble the first RMA conference where I said, I didn't like the RMA at the beginning. I'm not sure if I like it now. And I said, oh, the lawyers had to create the RMA because you legalized divorce, so they had to have a way to make money. The same with the war machine. The war machine needed to manufacture stuff in volume. We built roads, we built motorways, we destroyed communities, we bulldozed what they called slums, which were communities, we built new suburbs, we built cars everywhere, petrol stations. We did it all of that, probably in 10 to 15 years. Is it beyond our capacity to build a sustainable city? No, except we don't want to. We're all slaves to capitalism. And we're slaves by choice because probably we are all winners. Every one of us in here is probably a winner of the system. So where did that leave the city centre? You know, the walled city. Build a wall, keep all the suburbanites out. We've got our green networks. We've got our river. And where's our villages? We missed that, didn't we? I lived in London, but no, I never told anybody I lived in London. I lived in Hackney, and then I lived in Islington. I didn't live in London. When I lived in Glasgow, my parents knocked on me. They lived in the Gallowgate. It's a great name, Gallowgate, because the gallows were there. It's a gateway to the gallows. You always put things like that in the poor area because then you don't need to go too far. You can only walk to the gallows, so it's easy, you know. Like they always dump a prison in the poor area. We had the prison as well next to where they used to live, so it was like a big happy family in that area. And so here we have our neighbourhood centres. We say that we're not getting residents in the centre of the city. That's because there are no neighbourhoods. There are no neighbourhood centres. There are no local parks. We don't have small local schools. We don't have the local dairies and the cafes and stuff like that in most of these areas. And so we haven't built the social glue and fabric that makes people want to live in the city centre. We've done a lot of things, but we haven't done that. We haven't actually even started to imagine a city centre as a mixed-use residential area. But we have done some things and lots of things when you walk around. And I'm actually quite proud. And I didn't do most of it, but I'm quite proud to have lived here and live here and walk around and see some of the things. And isn't our riverfront starting to look fantastic? And isn't it telling a story that goes deeper than colonialisation and tells another story? That little footprint that's there that's saying, actually, we were here before, and we're part of you, and you're part of us. And that with the opening of Riverside now, we've got a more egalitarian waterfront. Ordinary people are coming down because you can buy a $10 meal. You can sit on the grass. And so I think, like last night, wasn't that a great night to be down at the river in the sun? You'll get more of that until we can't go out because there's too much sun, so let's have that. Enjoy it while you're there. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is what I really think in my darkest days. This isn't the meaning of this one, but I thought it could mean two things. Because my son's leaving school soon. He'll be going to art school, so he won't make any money, of course. And one day, all of this will be yours, my son, because I'm not going to leave you anything either. And we're not going to leave a planet that's habitable, unless we waken up. It's 1 minute to midnight now. There is no time left. We have to act now and stop postulating and do it. Thank you very much.